So I'm Carolyn, Dawson, CEO of Founders Forum. Instead, we are, I think, just to give you some explanation and context, a global community of tech entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and government policymakers. And we really convene these groups together to accelerate the pace of technology change, predominantly for the startups and scale-ups in our ecosystem. And we do that because we just, in the way of bringing peer-to-peer connections together, that's how we kind of feel it's very important. How can we connect the right startup to the right investor at the right time, or the right startup to the right corporate at the right time, ultimately all in the path of technology adoption? And we are one of the partners of the AI Hub. For us, it was really important to bring companies together. So I have no further ado. So I've got Mark Butcher, who's the director of, now how do you pronounce this? Positiv? Is this
Positiv.
Positiv? Oh, is that just a typo?
Which is somewhat ironic given how negative I am about most
Well, I
things.
know. I was just like, hang on. When you were on the meeting, I was like, he's not very positive at all. And Green Ops advocate. I've got Gopal Ramchurn, CEO of Responsible AI and the University of Southampton. I have Benedict Macon-Cooney, someone I know very well, who is the Chief AI and Innovation Officer for the Tony Blair Institute, who do an awful lot of work in this space. And in your personal capacity, or come on, a little bit of the company, Matt Harris, who is the lead for the UK and Middle East and Africa for HPE. So welcome, everyone. We want to make this interactive. So I think rather than me kind of going through set pieces of questions, etc., I think if you have questions or thoughts, stick your hand up. I will look out. And it's not a huge group. It's not a big room. We've got microphones, but we can definitely get the conversation flowing. So why don't we start a little bit? I mean, gosh, we do an awful lot of work across governments, corporates, and all sorts around AI adoption. But if we start with the macro, maybe hopefully come out into positive stances. What do we think about the UK's AI vision? We had a little bit there. I'll start. Go on. I'm going to start with you, Ben. The next 5 to 10 years, how do you see AI shaping the UK's economy? And boy, we need a bit of reshaping. And society. And where do you think we might see the first impacts landing?
Okay, well, thank you. And I hope you enjoyed that. I think I've always taken Tony's advice never to watch myself or read about myself. So I found that a slightly daunting experience.
Remember what you said, though?
Yeah.
It wasn't a bot.
Yes, exactly. Now, where to start? I've just come back from Silicon Valley, actually, so I always come back slightly more pessimistic when I've been there because you realize how far ahead they are. Now, I mean, sort of my macro view on this is this. So you've got two complete superpowers in the AI race right now, which are the US and China. They are miles ahead of everyone at the moment. And, you know, whether that's particularly in the frontier models, which you've got, you know, the big frontier labs of OpenAI, Anthropic, and obviously Google DeepMind, which we can claim to here. And then Chinese models like DeepSeek and that are they're just blowing the competition out of the water at the moment. That is kind of always a slightly disconcerting message. And because if you can project that ahead in the next few years, unless you have some capabilities on that, you know, you are so far behind in the economic race for the 21st century. Now, where we are at the UK, you know, we get lots of positive messages, and then we do have some really good capabilities. We have some amazing companies. I mean, around here, just to King's Cross is probably globally third the best in the cluster. You could probably put France, Canada, somewhere there or thereabouts. Israel, South Korea also has some capabilities, but we probably are staking that claim for third place right now. Now, the government has had the action plan put in place, which, you know, was mentioned in the film, and Matt Clifford did a fantastic job there. But the nub always comes with government is not just the written words, is it actually being delivered? And I think one of the things, if you go and speak to any politician today, you will say to them, the technology revolution is the big world event happening right now, and they'll go, yeah. And they won't disprove that, but then you will say, well, what are you doing about it? And they'll be like, well, you know, we've got the traditional sort of politics, we've got welfare reform to do, we've got all this other stuff to do, and then, you know, we'll get to the sort of the geeky side issue of technology once all the actual traditional politics are done. And, you know, to my view on this, that mindset is just totally wrong today. And, you know, if you think some of the timelines, whether we can talk about AGI in 2 to 5 years, which is some of the projections of the market, nothing else matters really to some degree in political terms. And so I think in many ways we're in a good position. There is so much going on in the wider market, but we are no way near being radical enough at pushing the agenda. And if we don't, I mean, I'm very, very worried about the few years ahead, because, you know, if this, by the way, if this isn't a radical reform in government, something else will come in as well very, very soon and probably begin to pick up some of this mantle.
And we sort of heard the PM being quoted there, and I remember sitting in that session where it was kind of talking about this global AI race and the competition's on. But is it really a competition? Because can we ever imagine trying to do this in our silos? Where have we got to play to our strengths and vulnerabilities? And maybe it's a question, you know, Matt, you're in a global organization, but is it really us versus China versus the US? Or actually, do we not just have to see this as this is one area? And actually, this was something that Sir Richard Moore said, who's the kind of former head of MI6, is this is one area like nuclear where actually we do all have to come together for certain aspects, maybe not all, but where are the dividing lines? I don't know if either of you.
I think we're racing against more than the US and China. They're clearly ahead and probably can't be caught. Look at the natural resources they've got, the size of the government spend and pockets they've got, the entrepreneurs and conditions that already exist in either the Silicon Valley or developers in China or whatever. So let's reality check. We're not going to catch them. But that doesn't mean we can't be incredibly economically competitive and create businesses and opportunities or new services that can be groundbreaking and life-changing on the face of Britain. I'm biased. I run a large part of a US tech company, but technology has always been, or has latterly in the last decades been, the big accelerator of productivity, economic development. And if you go and look at some of the last waves of, let's say, mobile or cloud, where did the UK play? Well, we played and we made a choice to go, let's get strategically dependent on some large US companies. Let's go and run a government UK cloud-first policy. Well, what did that mean? That meant that we put all of our data, all of our infrastructure to some US corporations, and the ones that really benefited, is it us using cloud services and we've lowered our short-term costs? No, it's the US hyperscalers who've made a huge amount of money out of that and are now as powerful as sovereign governments. And if you really go and think about the largest organizations on the planet who we are all dependent on, they typically are all American. So why do I remain an optimist? You know, I look after the Middle East region and the Africa region as well as the UK. Well, everyone's in the same race now. And what AI has done, it has democratized and I said in the film, everyone's access to it. So if you are from the UK or you're from a traditional third world country, you have access to ChatGPT. You can go and engage with it in a particular way. You can, and it's not a Google search. It is a way of potentially unlocking new ways of work. So there could be theoretically tons and tons of new businesses that are created on our shores where we don't have dependency in the way that we have in other tectonic eras and shifts. But to get that right, we have to play to our strengths. What are our strengths? We have an incredible, for now, education system, which is going to be turned on its head over the next 2 decades, where going to Oxford or Cambridge, which is world-renowned at the moment, might not be as world-renowned in 2050, as an example. We have amazing entrepreneurial spirit here. We have a really multicultural and collaborative-based society, but we are leaking talent all the time to areas where the conditions are better. And the reason I'm positive, I actually think things like the government AI plan, I don't remember what the cloud plan was for the UK economy at the time, or the mobile plan at the time. We didn't have one, but at least we have a plan. And now we've got to go and see that through, and there's a responsibility. And I would like to see almost a national unity around this to put us on the map.
Thank you. And well, Mark, should we see if you have any, is there positivity about it? Or what would you call out as perhaps our vulnerabilities and things we need to watch out for? And I think just broadly, yeah, what's your sort of view on where we might start to see the differences?
I think I should probably strap on my tinfoil hat. I'm seeing nothing but problems and lunacy with the strategy that we're taking, and I think we're delusional about the way we're going. If you look back at the whole government cloud first strategy, the most ridiculous unpicking of the UK tech society that's ever been seen, we basically wrote a strategy which said we're going to give all of our money to two big American hyperscalers. Neither of those hyperscalers contribute to UK society. They don't pay tax. They don't contribute back in whatsoever to any meaningful effect. And we're now repeating exactly the same exercise with the AI adoption. And the reason why I say some of this is lunacy was we're deciding to invest in what we're calling AI growth zones. But we don't actually have any consumers for those AI growth zones. Because if you look at what the UK government's doing, the UK government has signed long-term 5 to 10 year commitments with the hyperscalers. Because do you really think that the hyperscalers sat back for the last couple of years waiting for these AI growth zones to take place? They've been rampaging through signing long-term commitments. So if our own government isn't willing to spend with the very AI growth zones they're investing billions in building, and I love the way it's phrased as an investment as well. It's not. We've agreed to give another 5, 10, 20 billion to American tech companies with no controls. And at the same time, we've got the geopolitics of this as well. So if you look at the statements Trump's come out with recently in the press about his views on Europe, he sees us as a lower form of life. And so effectively, we're ceding control of all of our assets, all of our data, all of our platforms, all of our services to a bunch of people that we can't trust who are taking our money and giving nothing back at all. And we're refusing to spend. We talk this great game about we're willing to invest in UK society. We're not. We're literally unpicking the jobs from the future generation of kids. Because kids coming out of university, they have nowhere to go and work now. What are they going to go and do with these fictitious jobs that are supposed to be created? They don't exist out there. I'm seeing big enterprises, left, right, and centre, are cutting internships, reducing graduate recruitment. So we can't expect the kids to suck up the pain for the next 15, 20 years and just say it's all going to be great. And then before anyone dares mention universal basic income, the biggest delusional thought process that I think I've ever seen whatsoever, because we're somehow thinking that we're going to take, a billionaire is going to become a trillionaire. That's the only thing that's going to come out of the AI arms race, is someone's going to become a trillionaire first. The outcome of that is that trillionaire is going to carry on offshoring all their tax revenues as far as possible into the lowest tax jurisdiction they possibly can. Moving that $1 trillion into over there, it reduces the tax base. Sorry.
I think it all makes sense. You concur. I want to add to that just the fact that we're talking about what the current government's doing, but frankly, we all know what the next government's going to be, and their history of handouts and tax breaks. To what extent is all of this work going to be completely undone in the next 5 years?
I think it's just going to move the money from one place to another. It won't change the direction. So I think what we're stuck with now is making the best of a bad thing and making the best of the decisions and looking at what we can do. But what we have to do is, I think I said it in the film, which is we need to actually be willing to spend with UK companies doing UK things and support UK jobs. It's literally as simple as that. And what we can't have is a government that exists saying, well, I know we've got all these UK companies, but we're not going to give them any money. We're going to go and spend it all over there. We have to actually support these UK entities, because before the hyperscalers came along, there was brilliant managed service providers that existed delivering exactly the same services in exactly the same way for often a fraction of the price. Because actually, cloud in most cases is the most expensive way of buying services you can possibly find. And AI is no different. And what we're seeing in AI is just an acceleration of that same thing.
Okay, well, Gopal, do you have before? I mean, we could go down the sovereignty, we could go down skills. It's like, no, this is literally going to zoom us through all the questions. So but don't worry, we'll come to all of these back.
I just wanted to can I turn this on? This is an AI.
Claude, is it?
Claude,
Yeah.
So that will record the whole conversation. You're okay with that? And it's replacing my executive assistant, literally, because it can generate a much better summary of my meetings and pick up the names of the speakers as well. And this is happening in real time. As Matt said, everyone's getting access to AI, and that includes the developers. China is a leader in open source AI. DeepSeek is open source. You can download it, you can improve it, you can add many layers of reinforcement learning on top of it and improve its performance in any sector you want, right? It's free. You can do it yourself. 2 words have come out since last year, since last September, October. Agentic AI, vibe coding. Have you heard of these words? It's moving really fast, right? And we're seeing this affect the space of advances in AI in the research community in many sectors, but not sufficiently in those sectors that need it most. So it should be replacing jobs, but not probably in some of the key sectors. Healthcare being one, where recently watched a presentation by Ian Abbs from ex-guys in St. Thomas Hospital, showing us how the number of people employed by the healthcare service is going up, but satisfaction levels are going down, queues are going up. We're not doing well. And it's not because, and we can't solve this just with AI. I mean, we will need to change the way the whole health system is working. And I think that points to something quite different from this AI race that we talk about. There are many AI races in many different sectors. It's not just one AI race. It's not about building the best AI, the best LLM, and we have it for free from China as well, and we can fix the various issues in it. We can't build microchip fabrication facilities in the UK. Never going to do that. But we have a unique talent base. We have a very strong research community that is well versed in multidisciplinary research and applied research and understanding of human elements. We are leaders in responsible AI. So I run Responsible AI UK, which is the largest funded research program, bringing many disciplines to look at AI, responsible AI issues in healthcare, in criminal justice systems, in law enforcement. We are leaders in these areas. What is missing is investment. I've got 2 startups, one in energy and one in sports, UK-based startups. My 3rd startup will be based in the US, just because it's much easier to raise money there to enable these companies that are building cutting-edge AI to really expand and be world leaders. We have the talent here, but we're not really investing in them.
God, again, 2 tangents. I could go completely down. This is getting tricky. I'm actually going to stay with talent. So I'm going to zoom a little bit ahead, because you sort of raised the jobs issue. I sit on the Digital Skills Council for the UK government. One of the things they're sort of talking about is, right, well, how do we deal with this with corporations that are now literally employing far less? You know, the consultancy is already 30-40% less. The same with law firms, the same with internships, absolutely. But I think one of the challenges or the caveats has been, well, the Industrial Revolution happened, and that sort of saw a lot of the industrial and mechanical engineering work turn into white-collar work. So this is not the first time that the UK has been through evolutions like this, and there will just be a learning. You just said, though, healthcare jobs up, maybe satisfaction down. But if I stay with doom and slightly more positive side at the moment, do we not see that is the potential evolution, that there are just co-pilots, more creativity, more opportunities that can come from this? And you're obviously on the coalface as well in university. Do you see this sort of pessimism from the student communities?
Yeah, I mean, I get contacted on LinkedIn by
bots or real students?
By parents asking me, what should my son or daughter study at university, because their job could be taken over by AI very quickly. Just to give you some stats within the research community, the largest AI conference, NeurIPS, had 21,000 papers submitted this year, mostly from China. Many of these AI generated. Even researchers are changing their practices. Triple AI, 29,000 submissions, 22,000 from China. And the research community had to hire 75,000 reviewers to review these papers, most of them using AI. So you have AI talking to AI in the research community. My worry is that the next crop of researchers will not even bother reading a paper, not bother doing the research to do their PhDs. We have one academic, for example, at UC Berkeley, who's published 134 papers. The article in The Guardian, if you look it up last week or in the weekend, just AI generated. So these jobs are changing very, very quickly. What should we retrain into? And there's an interesting project at the LSE funded by Anthropic to look at the future of work. How do we, what if you're not going to be a computer scientist? And we had this question posed at our last all hands meeting last year, and it's completely changed with vibe coding. And to experience this myself, I decided to write a research paper and managed to do that within 2 days. And a lot of that was done, just by prompting, but making sure that it maintains some level of academic integrity. But AI is getting so much better at this stuff. What else can we do as humans is becoming a big question. I think in very sort of knowledge intensive activities, lots of jobs are going to be taken over, and we're seeing that at a very basic level, internships down, etc., etc. The numbers are staggering. But what else? I mean, Jensen said in the next million years will be plumbers and electricians. Maybe we should think about that.
Right, to come back on my delusional statement about that, every time he says that, I feel like literally punching the guy in the back of the head. It's stupidity. So, and what I mean by that, and I'm being very blunt, but it's if we say that, what happens if we make everyone become a plumber and an electrician? What happens if everyone dives into that market? Market saturation, prices go down, wages go down. So we're literally pushing everyone down to the lowest possible common denominator, whilst the ultra-rich are becoming more wealthy off the backs of it. All we're doing is we're creating the Hunger Games. It's as simple as that. We're allowing them to manipulate us into giving all their money over. And the whole expectation that they always sell this wonderful dream that we can go and wander around the daisy fields writing poetry and singing songs. With what money? It comes back to the idea of, they're not willing to pay tax today, so why do we expect they're going to be willing to help us pay a universal basic income? At what point do we expect that to be a reality?
Matt. You employ lots of people in the UK.
Yeah.
One of these big American hyperscalers.
I'm not a hyperscaler. I'm not a hyperscaler.
Just owned by one. But what's your what's your view on where the AI skills gap is, where perhaps some of the opportunities are? How are you thinking about your workforce and reskilling, retraining, hiring?
Well, so clarity, HP is not a hyperscaler. And I'm completely aligned
On its way.
with Mark on putting money into UK businesses. I think that is so critical, and the government needs to put its money where its mouth is. Also, I worry about the haves and the have-nots, which is why the whole kind of retraining of the education system, because if we like it or not, AI is not going away. And if I think about my own kids, I think about they need to be familiar with how they prompt, or they need to be familiar with how they can utilize some of these tools to conduct day-to-day tasks, which are just going to be unfamiliar to me in terms of the age profile that I am. We do have a lot of people in my organization. A lot of the AI solutions that we sell to our customer base, the reality, and to echo Mark's points, are at the moment the business cases that the enterprise are looking at is productivity gains, which fundamentally is how many jobs do I take out. So the short term is incredibly scary in that way. You can flip that and say, well, how much inefficiency is there, therefore, in society, in enterprises, in organizations today? And if there is a more productive way of doing things, should we be embracing that? I think we should be. That's about how society moves forward. And I'd like to think there are many jobs that we can't even envisage today because we don't know what they could be. And that's okay that we don't know what they are, because even going back how many years, there weren't jobs in coding. How many people code today? There weren't jobs in data center engineering. That's okay that we might not know what those jobs are today. I think the scary thing is it's such a dynamic change. What we're doing internally, by the way, we're not buying a tool, we're not buying a technology, we are reskilling everyone to understand how to do things like prompting, because we are now not in an era where we are Googling things, we are actually engaging with a tool that is fundamentally interacting with us in a different way. So a huge reskilling. We've not taken any cost out of my organization at the moment. We are probably a beneficiary of an uplift because customers are buying lots of technology aligned to AI, but at the moment, we are not seeing big cost takeout from our organization.
And as you said, really in the video, it's not necessarily the fear it will be taken, your job will be taken from you. It's more that you've just got to adapt.
100%. And Gopal was just talking about, as an example, he has done that. He's got something that he's wearing that can make him incredibly more productive. And actually, who wouldn't want to be more productive? How many times have we had late nights, work the weekends, where we aren't seeing those critical moments of our kids growing up, or being a better husband to my wife when I'm traveling, as an example. So I'm an embracer of the technology more than fearful of it.
Yeah. Yes. Question in the audience.
So two very extreme questions in ends of the spectrum. The first one is, so what what are we lacking in the UK in terms of infrastructure? In terms of that, that data center, the connectivity, the way, the underpinning resource that we need in place. If the panel will comment on that, because there seems to be this assumption that the infrastructure that exists in the US and elsewhere is just that much better. I'm not sure that is always true. And who should be investing in that infrastructure? Is it down to should there be some government buying that? Should there be community buying that? Is it just down to business? And you say everybody should buy into this. So who's going to build an infrastructure and what do we need in the UK?
If I may, I'm going to ask Ben one more question to close off the talent piece. Then infrastructure is definitely one of our biggest themes. So I want to come back to that for sure, because I know we were literally having a discussion. Gopal was talking about this, but one thing about we have talked about talent. We've talked about we're losing talent. We're losing brilliant PhDs, researchers, or we're not attracting them. Interestingly, we operate the international talent visa for highly skilled talent. We're not seeing any drop in data of entries into the UK, yet we also do still feel this sentiment of we're not making ourselves the most attractive. I think I'm just interested because you obviously work with a lot of emerging governments. And there is a thing actually around the skilling. AI is providing a bit of more democratization of skills as well. So I think if I'm going to touch on two different parts that I think you'd be really well placed to answer is perhaps, is AI enabling or perhaps leveling up of the skills? And then perhaps just a view on how can we make sure we still maintain a competitiveness?
Yeah. Maybe I'll take the second first, actually, because I think I'll... well, number one, sometimes we look at some, sort of the quantum of people. The interesting thing about the AI talent race at the moment is that, there are just extraordinary returns to the very top tier of the people. And this is why, that sort of, whether it's you're looking at some maybe 20,000 leaving, if it's 10,000 of those are the absolute top tier AI researchers and they've fled to the US and they're getting 2 billion pay packages, etc. That real thin end of the frontier side is actually the real core component on this. And there again, Silicon Valley is just destroying everyone at the moment just because of the just the extraordinary salaries that they are able to pay.
2 million or so, wasn't it, for a Google researcher versus the government's 100K?
Yeah, and we're not helping ourselves with some of our policy at the moment as well. I'm afraid, whether that is on things like non-dom status, exit taxes, even non-competes within the... I've heard stories of, because of the non-competes, half of DeepMind people who have made quite a lot of money based in London are I'm going to go and take that money out in Silicon Valley and do my startup there as well. And, I think we've kind of not diagnosed the market conditions and we've gone very hard on, let's say, some of the employment rights right now, which I'm not saying are necessarily wrong, but they might just be timed at the wrong point in the cycle of where you are in the technology development, particularly in this very globally competitive race. Some bits are wrong, by the way, but it's just you will see this, and it's why if you look at also our absolute versus relative levels of exodus as well, of millionaires, just as a thing. People aren't going to shed tears of that, I know, in the public, but it is the positive flywheel of wealth often, and we've lost more in absolute terms than China. In recent times, as Xi Jinping has been cramping down on his tech sector as well. So I do think there is a lot that we need to do to retain that wealth and the virtuous cycle that comes with the right kind of wealth, i.e., the Silicon Valley flywheel of that. If you've got Sam Altman investing another billion into another startup and actually mentoring that talent base, we need some more of that ecosystem, because that expertise of helping build and scale companies is a bigger gap actually as the capital side, I think, because we do not have a whole class of successful founders who have exited, put their capital back into the market and mentored. We're so early in that cycle and we need to really, really encourage that. Arguably that's the same is true across the whole of Europe. To some degree, Daniel Ek might be the most successful version of that right now, and a few of the Skype guys, right? This from the founders.
No, we do. There's so many, and I think it's the fact is the government. Well, everyone just seems so short-sighted about the fact that there are major philanthropic investors in the creatives and the arts and things which the UK holds so dear to its heritage, and we are losing them in the droves, and they are going to Dubai and others because they have a longer-term strategy of a 10, 20-year vision as opposed to a let's just hope we can get re-elected. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and on the democratization of skills, yes, to some degree, but I think it's still, I think it is, you know, we do actually have an extraordinary talent base here. You know, Oxford, it might change in the next 20 years, but actually has some of the best PhDs coming out. Imperial is fantastic. You know, some of the other side, we do have some people that should have some of the skills that will be able to adapt in the market. Now, countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, they are being incredibly aggressive on this, and they've made it a national strategy. And I think they have got coordinated versions of this with actually high-value data sets for people to train on, and just, again, vast amounts of capital. And so they will be very fast followers. You see countries like Singapore, which are just fantastic skills across the base. Now, on the lower end of the spectrum, I've seen some countries that are beginning to really think about this in quite a coordinated way. Actually, Albania has been quite the prime minister there, Amir Emirati, who was one of the founders of OpenAI and Thinking Machines, is Albanian, and I know has helped support that, and he's built that compact. Actually, some smaller countries which are very low down the development chain, like Rwanda, have been very, very interesting in how they begin to deploy this as well. And I would, the way that I think about this sometimes, if you look at the big waves of nation building throughout history, almost everyone has been born out of some form of like real crisis. Like, two trajectories like North and South Korea. One went very enlightened, one went very bad. Yeah. And one got to a first world status. Estonia coming out of the Soviet Union as independent. That went very aggressive on the tech side and flew up the development charts. Now, an interesting one in that domain will be Ukraine, which is through crisis and is doing agentic government and has got very software skills. So there are some that are thinking about that next wave in a very, very aggressive way. And some of it will become, I think, from quite unexpected places.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's go to the infrastructure question, because it is huge. Mark, you sort of touched on it. Gopal and I had the opportunity to talk about it a little bit before. But do we think the UK has to invest in all this infrastructure? Do we think it is an absolute need? We are talking about these growth zones, and I think to your point, to your question, who should be funding it and what should we do? But if we just, who would like to start?
Well, so a positive view. Yeah, a positive view, an upbeat view. And actually, a lot of it always starts with the people and the policies and the standards in the first place, because one of the problems we have is access to power at the right level and the right scale in the right places and enabling people to access it. But then there's also the question of why are we putting it in the places we are as well. So a lot of the decisions that we make, we obsess about putting as many data centers as we can slamming into the south at massively high density, which is just ridiculous to be doing so. We don't need to be doing that. We should be placing them elsewhere in the country. I mean, if you look at, say, northeastern Scotland, we could be creating a huge amount of jobs there directly connected to actually genuinely renewable energy, rather than pretending it's renewable energy, which is what most of the hyperscalers do today. They make up the numbers as they go along. That's another story for another day. But yeah, we definitely do need, if we're going to do this, we do need more data centers, more facilities, but we need to actually get the process and people sorted before that, because there's no point building them in the wrong place.
Yeah. Gopal?
Yeah, thanks. No, I think it's great work being done by Dark Matter and on this educating and surfacing some of these challenges. So thanks for doing that. I think around infrastructure in particular, recent article in Financial Times, you'll see a whole report on the barriers to the AI growth zones. I mean, one being the grid capacity to accommodate these big data centers, water usage as well. How will you cool them? It could be liquid cooled, but just power is a main roadblock to the AI growth zones. And not just in terms of the capacity on the lines, but the generation capacity itself. Now, we've seen this play out really badly in Ireland, where the big data centers built and sucking out all the cheap, green, renewable energy that exists in Ireland and leaving all the expensive, carbon-emitting sources to the local population who can't afford that energy. That could happen here if we're not very careful about how we finance these facilities, where we build them, and thinking carefully about where we should locate those facilities. I mean, should we have these big data centers hosting the Microsoft services for or Meta services for to generate cat videos or funny dog videos, or should we just reserve this capacity for safety critical applications, government services, public services, which contain sensitive data, and then build all these data centers somewhere else where we have access to cheap electricity, because we can transfer all the data here, remembering that compute is one thing, but the real value lies in the services that we sell out of the AI. I mean, NVIDIA is very conscious of that. When NVIDIA is going out selling its GPUs, it is asking everyone, what are you going to use it for? Do you have a customer for the service that you'll be offering on top of this AI service that you're going to run? And that's really key. I mean, they're still trying to unlock that. I don't think we've seen that, given the revenue numbers that and the costs that we're seeing for most of the hyperscalers. And one last thing about infrastructure, and maybe we can come back to that later, is how long these data centers will last, given that the refresh cycles for these GPUs is quite short, given that these GPUs get hammered with lots of compute at random times and random throughputs and degrade very, very quickly, and we can't really predict those. Many of these facilities are financed at 80, maybe 60% utilization rate, and they quickly go down to 30% capacity. Will these survive? For 10, it's very different. I compare this to powering a Ferrari versus a Toyota. So traditional data center, very reliable Toyota. 15, 20 years, you can run this data center. A Ferrari breaks down 3 months, but it's a very expensive car, and you can't replace it when the GPU breaks. It's very hard to replace it.
Can I just point out something we're saying there? It sounds to me like we're saying there's no business case for AI.
The gentleman's question was, well, who needs the build? What do we not have, which other countries have? And the power is actually the biggest problem. When you speak to any customer, any provider, it's powering these data centers and the impact to the national grid. Again, though, I think this is an opportunity for innovation, and where are these jobs going to come from? Alistair in his opening talked about Isambard AI. So the national AI GPU cluster, which the government did buy, which is an HPE system with the University of Bristol, is built in the University of Bristol car park, a space which wasn't used, and is built in a modular liquid-cooled pod, which was implemented in the university car park and is running the largest 10,000 GPUs, the largest cluster we have. It's a car park. It was a car park, and 9 months later was running the national AI program. So when we think about this, it's only bricks and mortar. But given the scale and the energy requirement to power some of these data centers, you do need new technologies like liquid-cooled technologies. By the way, there's a huge amount of innovation. There's a huge amount of companies who are developing in this space. There's also some innovative companies. We partner with, again, a UK company, pretty new company called Carbon3.ai. And what they're doing, they were a waste company that had a load of tips and wasteland around the UK, and they were burning some of that and selling some of that energy back to the national grid. They've looked at that and said, well, rather than giving it back to the grid, why wouldn't I go and put a modular data center in this particular location and actually go and drive GPU type clusters? And it is sovereign. It's a UK company as an example for that. So we can be incredibly creative. We don't have to think in the same traditional ways. But to answer the gentleman's question, we need innovation. We need data centers or the capacity, but critically we need power. And that's where the national race is on, because also we have, to Mark's point, areas in the country where it is much cheaper to power based on natural conditions, like it's colder in the northeast. I live there, by the way, than it is in the southeast. There is such density in the southeast of where we all live, and therefore the power available. And it also doesn't need to necessarily be in southeast. And you go into some of the government's kind of levelling up agenda, or how we go and drive new roles and jobs in areas which are less economically as advanced, even on the UK shores. There's a great opportunity here.
Yeah.
Well, why not?
One thing you've not mentioned in infrastructure is the NIMBY problem, which is massive in the UK comparative to America. Obviously, there's have now been designated CNI, which at least is something that we can at least be thankful to the government for. But the argument is, how do you then advise to go into the general public to make them aware that actually this is for their benefit? Because frankly, you speak to Joe on the street, they'll tell you a data center is disgusting, ugly, and will steal my power. That's just as important as reducing the cost of power as well.
So I agree with this, but I think the planning reforms should have been much further and faster on that. Actually, if you look back through the history of infrastructure as well, when we did electricity pylons across the country, one of the biggest, there was a whole objection from many, many people at that point, including John Maynard Keynes, and they called themselves the pylon poets, and they would write poetry against the monstrosity that was built across the land as well. And one of the things I actually thought would have been an interesting thing to do with also data centers, I know it would add on costs to the business, but would have been to do some sort of grand design, national architecture things. So, like there's a cathedral in Barcelona which has been reconstituted as a data center, but build them as civic infrastructure that actually adds some beauty to the land. I think it would have been an interesting way to try and get some public support around them, as well as maybe the sort of the cathedrals of the future to some degree. But I mean, I don't know how HP feel about that extra cost. But one last thing on infrastructure then, and I do very much agree with that. I mean, I completely agree with the energy question. We could debate that all day, because I think we have basically made some fundamental strategic mistakes. And even if you look at the cost of wind right now in the UK relative to some of its peers, it is extraordinary. One area which I'm just obsessed with about the future as well, and this might get some eye rolls, but nuclear fusion, if we want to take a strategic bet on the future, we've got Culham, we've got some really good infrastructure, and that is an area where we've actually built some stuff, and maybe it still will be 10, 20 years ago, but it is a sort of a grand vision bet that, when you looked at Nick Clegg, say 15 years ago, well, nuclear takes 10 years to build on the grid, and the mistakes that makes, if we get some of that long-term planning into politics again, I think that's one area. Go on.
Yeah,
Go on.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but it's up. But one of the things where it comes to the whole, we need nuclear because we need to meet the power requirement.
Yeah.
The elephant in the room that we're unwilling to address is the ridiculousness of the fact we're not willing to look at efficiency of consumption. So we're building all these gigantic bit barns full of stuff, but actually most of the enterprise is using them. So if I look at the top 10 organisations that I'm working with, their average waste on AI is 85 to 90% of the resources are wasted. So what we're doing is we're throwing huge amounts of GPUs and huge amounts of power into something where we know that 85 to 90% of it is generating no financial return whatsoever. So actually we should be forcing AI providers and actually enterprises to have transparent reporting on their consumption of these services, because they're so critical. Because I think if you focus on the efficiency of consumption, what we'll suddenly see is a sea change in the willingness of businesses to invest another 100 million, 200 million in something where they're saying, so I'm investing it and I'm getting absolutely nothing back. And I use that as an example when I attended a recent conference where McKinsey stood up and talked about the wonderful business benefits of AI and how it was going to deliver huge returns back into society. And being mean, I asked them if they could give me one example of a business case where it was provable that AI at scale had delivered a financial return. And the poor managing partner of McKinsey stood there on a stage blustering for about 15 minutes, and he couldn't come up with a single example anywhere. And his only answer was, we're too early in the cycle at the moment. You've got to wait another 10, 15 years to see. It's like, oh, am I the only one seeing that we're willing to throw trillions of dollars into a problem where we have no obvious return whatsoever? And I'm already seeing some epic amounts of waste that we could eliminate just by operating more sustainably.
Are there questions in the audience that you're holding that's burning? Yes.
Yeah, I think the discussion I see is mostly focused on infrastructure, and AI is more than just infrastructure. There's the data, right? There's the infrastructure, and there's the intelligence, right? So I think you have to discuss which parts you want to play in on the intelligence side that McKinsey should have said in healthcare. If you talk to Sloan Kettering, they invest a lot of money. They took 100 years of all the cancer research data that we had, because their diagnosis was about 80%. And by using AI, that went between 94 and 95% early detection. So that's an intangible safety, right? So So there are parts, but I think part of this discussion, we have to decide which of those three areas.
This is good. AI for data sets for good.
quickly, yeah.
So let's talk about that, because actually on NHS data, all this. So go on.
Actually, one of the most positive stories that the UK has done in probably the last couple of decades has actually been the biobank on this regard as well, which is a really good example of like actually, basically the state creating a public good which has high value across the ecosystem as well. This government has announced its data trust, which is trying to expand some of this, and I think this actually also builds some value on top of that, also to return to patients as well. And I think this is a really powerful area. I mean, in the film I talked about DeepMind and AlphaFold as well. I think this is to me a no-brainer that we need to do a lot more on. And again, but I'm worried about it because we've talked about this as an opportunity for the UK. We built some of the foundations with the biobank, etc. And now you watch somewhere like China go off and completely win in the clinical trials space, and all the companies now are exporting their clinical trials to there because we destroyed our early advantage on this. And it's sort of a classic story, but I still think there is a lot that we can do in that. And I mean, health data isn't one. I think there could be a lot around transport systems, energy systems as well, which you can begin to create really high value data sets as well. But it also requires a different mindset of the state actually building that data to think of it as actually having basically a competitive asset in the same way that the firms have built it to build value on top of as well.
Yes. Yeah, just going back to what you said actually about the number of founders. I think you're right. I think recently LinkedIn saw that like the name founder in a profile has actually up. So I don't think that's the issue. I think the scale up portion is probably what we've lost 25 years in the last 10 years. What do you think following budget? Obviously, there was some kind of relief for those scale ups to stay in the UK, but what do you think public sector should do? This.
Someone else want to go, or do you want me to have a little?
Well, I mean, look, we did a lot of work with the government on this policy work, and the biggest thing that we could get thrown out, which we were very glad about, was the exit tax scenario. So again, it's slightly in the psychology of this country that we love an underdog until they're successful, and then we just want to do everything we possibly can to take them down. And our breasts don't necessarily help, as in we're not very good at celebrating our success and helping our companies get to scale. And some of that definitely is around our incentives. So we need to get comfortable with wealth creation, and we need to get comfortable with the ability for these founders to generate that, because again, we're seeing even with our international talent pool, 1 out of 4 of the people that we give visas to come in and create companies here. They're then creating jobs. I mean, the stats on the amount of economic creation that comes from the highly skilled immigration we're bringing in, but also the talent pool in the UK is incredible. But we need to do far more around some of the incentives that we're offering. EMI options, that was one area, but again, there's a lot more that can be done around our taxation here, just frankly. I know no one likes talking about tax, but it is one of the simplest tools that the founders ask for time and time again. The other piece really is around capital infrastructure. So our ability to win in the life sciences space and the infrastructure space just requires a lot more risk. Again, not something we're very good at in the UK. The moves with the British Business Bank have been very welcomed, but the whole thing is now direct investing versus we need far more institutional investments, and let's see if we perhaps actually have the balls to do something with our pension reform. Again, our worry is that we'll fall flat on that and not actually enforce it into UK companies, or again, that our UK government procures and still chooses the US giants over UK companies. Government and enterprises must make startups their customers, ultimately, for us to scale.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Maybe just the cultural one there as well around our press, but also the fear of failure, that we don't celebrate failure as Brits for whatever reason. I think it's far more accepted or tolerated or championed in the US. If you actually go and look at the tech billion to become trillionaires, you've got Elon Musk, I think born in South Africa, Eric, the Eduardo Saverin, co-founder of Google, I think was Brazilian. Jensen Huang, second generation Taiwan as an example. So this is not some sort of like, this is Americans doing great in America. It is people who are going there for the conditions that you talked about. And we've got to make it far more attractive and think about our British mindset and mentality to get behind it with a bit more optimism. I'm not looking at you, Mark, for any reason in that way.
Can I?
Can I
comments
just
from our group,
on similar issues with helping to grow UK-based startups, procurement rules, government procurement was one of the biggest barriers we've seen. I mean, we ran workshops with all the NHS trusts. That was surfaced as one of the big issues. I mean, the kind of thing that's going on in the NHS around procurement and other processes is just from the Napoleonic age, apparently. Yeah. So it's time to fix that, and maybe that's a leap we can do with AI and defense and security. I mean, the government is pushing ahead with its defense strategy, and big questions around what is that community, startup enablers that we will put in place, because the primes dominate most of the defense startups that have appeared on the UK scene, have gone to the US or just disappeared. The last few years, we've not seen anything new come up. So yeah, big changes needed in procurement.
One sort of scary statistic we had in the defence space was actually what we're seeing in the UK armed forces are seeing on the Ukrainian battlefield is that the time from testing to actually seeing a pivot in the technology change is 6 weeks. That's the life cycle of the technology change on the battlefield. Yet our government procurement is potentially 18 months to 2 years. So that just shows the disconnect that we need to actually drive ahead. Go on, Mark. There's something positive lurking in there somewhere.
Deep within. I mean, overall, yes, there are very good use cases for the technology. It's just that we need to be more sensible about how we're deploying it, how we're using it, and not using it for the various nefarious means, which is to drive profitability into the hands of very, very few. Because the examples that we're given of improving cancer research, improving healthcare, they're all brilliant things. But at the same time, we have the alternative where they're not being used for such positive means. So is it taxation? Is it legislation? Is it governance? Something needs to come where we have to be accountable for our decisions that we're making.
I don't know in what way. I suggest you not spend too long with Mark afterwards for drinks. No, I mean, maybe bringing it home is what I'm proud of in this piece of work in partnership with Dark Matter is not ignoring the difficult conversations and taking them head on. I would love to watch that sort of documentary. I'd watch it at home on a Saturday night on Netflix or something like that. And the danger is that this is kind of contained into a small audience of people who are very passionate, and you sometimes feel that you're kind of shouting into an echo chamber around this. I do work for a big US tech company, but what we provide is technology into the hands, and my customers are all British, they're all UK based when we are here. And the tech does exist for us to go to be building solutions, new services, getting behind startup communities. I'm personally committed to that. But I'm proud of the organisation to have that brave conversation, say quite openly, particularly when you've got very large competitors of ours. We talked about hyperscalers, we talked about the very few who are as powerful, if not more powerful, than government. So maybe there needs to be a united and a kickback approach, and maybe this documentary and this discussion starts that. Thank you for moderating, and thank you for the evening.
Thank you, everyone. And huge thanks to our panelists.